Thanks for tuning in to Minds of Tomorrow. I'm your host, Luis Acevedo, and with me today I have Giuseppe Filetto, aka The Kurgan, and he is a prolific author. He's written, from my count, at least 8 books. One of his most popular books has been Belief, and that is a book on restoring the Catholic tradition. He's also started the largest Systema organization in London, as well as been an armed operative in South America and South Africa, and now he's a YouTuber, and most of you probably know him as The Kurgan. So I'm going to refer to you as The Kurgan because that's how I've discovered you through Vox Day and all that. So if that's okay with you, thank you for being on the show.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for asking me to come on.
Of course. So I think a good place for us to start is to go a little bit about your journey into Catholicism, how you actually became a Catholic.
Well, my journey to Catholicism surprised nobody more than me, because I was at age 7. I remember the precise moment that I decided Catholics specifically were absolutely insane and I wanted nothing to do with them. In Italy, still to this day, we get some religious instruction in school. And when I was 7 years old, we had the priest that was coming in a couple of times a week or whatever, answering questions and trying to teach us, Catholicism. Although I know now that he wasn't really teaching us Catholicism, he was teaching us Vatican II stuff, which is absolutely satanic, Freemasonic nonsense. And the thing that made me completely reject Catholicism forever, pretty much as far as I was concerned, was he was going on about how Jesus died for our sins. And I was 7 and I couldn't get this. I was like, well, what are you talking about? Why would an innocent guy get killed for what we've all done wrong? That doesn't make any sense to me. And so I asked him a couple of times to repeat the situation, and he kept saying sort of the same sort of thing in different ways. And I was like, well, I don't think I'm understanding this, Don Gramaglia was his name. I'm sure he's passed on now, rest his soul. And I asked him, but, I don't understand. Can I make an example? And then you can tell me if I get it or not. And he goes, yeah, sure. And I said, so you're telling me like somebody robs a bank, shoots the teller, kills the teller, runs away, then the police catch him, and instead of putting him in jail, they put an innocent person in jail, like a priest or a nun in his place. And he goes, that's right, boy, you got it. And at that moment, I just felt the steel wall come down and go like, these guys are... And that was it. And then, all the other stuff that comes out with the supposed Catholic Church, pedophiles and, kids and all that stuff. So I was just like, these guys are completely wrong. And then the doctrinal brainwashing that we're all being subjected to, the zeitgeist of the planet, which is, the Dark Ages, and they were just burning random women at the stake and all that. So I never delved into it. And then I've lived very much a heathen lifestyle. I mean, I had a sense of justice and honor that was always very strong due to my family background or whatever. But essentially, I did whatever I wanted to do, and I treated people honorably as long as they treated me well. And I just did what I wanted to do, pretty much. And then I had a daughter. And as it happens, my daughter was kidnapped by her mother to Brazil when she was 15 months old, and I didn't sleep for a week. And then I went to see a film called Cloud Atlas. Now, people will tell you can't not sleep for a week. It's not true. The record is 11 days. Unlike what Jordan Peterson says, 25 days is absolute nonsense. After 11 days, you basically start. I didn't sleep for 7, went to see this film just to try and distract my brain. I wasn't paying attention to what the film was about or anything. I just sort of sat in front of the screen and let it all go in. And it's a 3-hour film. And when I walked out of that movie, I don't know if it had to do with the movie or whatever. It wasn't because my brain wasn't functioning, because my brain was unfortunately functioning a bit too well. That was the problem. I've never been on drugs, never been drunk. Or up to that point, I'd never even really had too much alcohol. And I had this experience which I cannot translate to anybody. It was a very subjective thing, but it was, very much a road to Damascus moment where I realized, there is a God, he exists, and he is love. That was about the sum of it. So then I started to investigate, okay, so there is a God, and he actually knows me, like he cares about me personally, which was absurd to me. It was an absurd thought that like a huge entity like God would care about some individual little human on Earth with the tiny planets in the myriad of planets that are around, suns all over the galaxy. So I started to think about, okay, for a brief period of time, I was basically a deist, which was, okay, there is a God and he's good. That's all I knew. And then I started to investigate, okay, which God? Now, before this, I had read about, Hinduism, Buddhism. I was sort of a Zen agnostic because I had studied and read enough about biology, physics, and chemistry to know that the maths didn't work out. So there had to be some intelligence behind creation, but in my mind, it was very much a sort of abstract concept. The idea of a God that actually cared about me personally and everybody else personally was just absurd to me until I experienced it in a way that I can't deny, and nor can I translate that experience to anybody else. But so I started reading the Bible, which I had read pieces of before, and all of a sudden what I realized, that the Bible was now, I could see so many different levels in it that I had never seen before. And when I could, check to confirm if these things were real, if it wasn't just me making up these additional layers of interpretation, and I studied it, and was like, oh, okay, that actually is what that means, and there are different levels of interpretations. So the Christian God became pretty clearly and pretty quickly the right God. Then it's like, well, which Christian God? And obviously it couldn't be Protestantism because there's 40,000 branches and counting, and those guys just make up the rules as they go along. And obviously they only exist because Christianity existed for 1,500 years before they came along to mess it up. So it had to be Orthodoxy or Catholicism or Copts. Now, I don't know anything about the Copts very much, other than they're very similar to the Orthodox in many ways. And I didn't like the Catholics at all. And I had a lot of Russian Orthodox friends. So I sort of thought, oh, well, more Orthodox is probably it. But then I started reading more and more into it. And undoubtedly, Catholicism was clearly the more logical and sensible position, and reasoned position, which sounds strange to anybody who is not a proper Catholic, because including myself, before, I thought Catholicism didn't make any sense, and that's because it's been perverted, twisted, and lied about so much. But so it was a process, it was an instant process in terms of the road to Damascus moment, but then it was a gradual process in terms of, studying through, reading patristic fathers and so on. And from the moment I had the road to Damascus moment to the moment that I got baptized, that was 4 years of intensive study. When I say intensive study, a lot of people, a lot of arrogant idiots actually have said, oh, you're just a new convert. You've got the zeal of the new convert. And I'm like, nah, you people don't understand what I'm like. When I study something obsessively, in 6 months, I can basically get to the level of a guy who's got a PhD in it and has then worked in that field for about 3 years, roughly speaking. And I'm not just blowing up my ass. I've done that with things like brain cancers and stuff like that for people that I cared about at the time. And I could converse with the top surgeons and doctors in that field after 6 months of research. Now, this was, to a certain extent, even more important to me, and I'd done about 4 years of research on it. So I kind of covered pretty much what you would do in, maybe a decade or more of deep theological studies. And I read the Code of Canon Law from cover to cover. And when I came up with Canon 188 Part 4, I thought, wait a minute. And then I thought, well, I can't be the only guy. That one of the things that helped me a lot was like, well, I can't be the only guy that's figured this out. And then I'd look for like people that had come to the same conclusions. And invariably, there's plenty of them, from Thomas Aquinas, St. Augustine on, or whatever. And so then I found out about Sede-privationism. And I studied that for a while. I started to attend their masses while just sitting at the back, watching what's going on. And sitting at mass had a profound effect. So eventually I got baptized, and the rest is sort of, I think most of the rest.
Right.
Long answer to your short question.
No, I love the long answers. So, the Mass, you brought up the Mass, and you inspired me as we were talking before the show to actually attend a Latin Mass. I was in search for one. Here in Ohio is where I'm located. And so I was, I went to the website that you recommended, and I found a Latin Mass, and I have to say, it was probably the most in touch I felt with God or whatever divine being, you believe there to be. Because as I mentioned before too, I've went to the Orthodox Church and attended their service. And although I resonated more with their theology, the Latin Mass, there was just something about it. I couldn't really understand what they were saying, but just everything about it. My wife went with me too to one of them, and we both agreed that it was like, it put us in the most meditative, easy to praying state that we've ever, been in, even in our own home. So it's just amazing. So anybody that isn't even Christian, I would recommend attending a Latin Mass if you can find one, because it's just something about them. Now, in your introduction, you mentioned briefly Vatican II, and you mentioned Sede-privationism. We'll get to the Sede-privationism in a moment, but could you maybe go into a little bit as to what the Vatican II is and why you believe, and from what you found, it to be heretical?
Okay. First, a slight point of correction. It's not what I believe. It's what the Church absolutely and infallible teaches you. The Catholic Church has got its dogmas all written down. And there are various books that you can buy and read on them. But essentially, you can read Denzinger or Ludwig Ott, or, there's a bunch of them that have written down, papal encyclicals all over. But if you read the Code of Canon Law, that pretty much has all the rules of the Church in one book. And that was the intent of Pope Pius X. So when people, the reason I'm particular about this is because, of course, Sede-privationists get accused by everybody, the Churchians, the Protestants, the fake Catholics, that, oh, you cannot judge, you're making yourself your own Pope and all that nonsense. No, there are dogmatic principles of Catholicism which are absolutely inflexible. I'll give you a very simple example that everybody can relate to. In Catholicism, you're not allowed to convert anyone to Catholicism by force. It is against the basic principle of Catholic dogma. So unlike Islam, if I put a gun to your head and I say you're Catholic, that doesn't count. It doesn't matter what you say, it doesn't count. Similarly, you cannot force somebody to get married against their will. It's just basic Catholic dogma. There are certain Catholic principles that they are absolutely inflexible. Now, there are also Catholic rules that relate to the clergy or how the church is run, and those are worldly rules. They can change with time and place and whatever, but the divine rules don't change. For example, Catholics are not to pray with or be in communion with Protestants or schismatics or Buddhists or whatever, because there is one true church. There is one true set of rules that most clearly is closest to God's idea of what he wants us to do here. And if you deviate from that, you're clearly in error. So, it's very simple. When you say, oh, you're a Sede-privationist because in your opinion, Vatican II, no, it's not my opinion. It's Catholic dogma, infallible Catholic dogma that's been around for 2,000 years. With respect to Vatican II, why it is absolutely heretical is because they turned on their head pretty much all the divine Catholic rules that are, for example, one of the Catholic dogmas is there is no salvation outside of the Catholic Church. So if you're not inside the Catholic Church, you will not get saved. Now, there are some very tiny exceptions, and they're not loopholes. They're tiny exceptions, because what does it mean to be inside the Catholic Church? Does it mean to be baptized, attend Mass? And yes, of course, it means all of that. But what if, let's say yourself, after this conversation, magically, because I'm such a charismatic, powerful man, you decide that, yeah, Catholicism is true, it's right. I'm going to rush out there, get myself baptized, and become a good Catholic. And as you're on your way to getting baptized, you get run over by a bus and you're dead. Now, God is not a lawyer. He's not going to go like, oh, this guy, Louis, great guy. Yeah, he was going to get back. Oh, he didn't get to baptism. Oops, sorry, going straight to hell for eternity. Doesn't work that way. And that's what baptism of desire is. So, you weren't faffing about. You weren't sort of there going, oh, well, I want to buy some ice cream first. And then, well, maybe I want to go see my girlfriend. You weren't like just pissing about. You were trying to go and get baptized as soon as you could by a proper priest, and you died on the way. It is deemed accepted that you're going to heaven or purgatory or whatever. And of course, the classical proof of this is the murder that was nailed to a cross next to Jesus. There were two of them. One of them was unrepentant and the other one was repentant, and the guy got to go to heaven without being baptized, clearly, because he was nailed to Jesus. So there are also what they call the internal forum and the external forum. So externally, you could be a bad Catholic, but internally in your heart, you really are a believer. You're just a bad, stupid guy. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean you go to hell. However, there are certain behaviors that are external forum. You do certain behavior externally, publicly, that absolutely mark you as an absolute heretic, and you are deemed a heretic publicly, notoriously, by everybody, and you're to be treated as one. And these are occasions where you publicly and notoriously and repeatedly do, perform, teach, or say absolutely heretical things. As in, if I'm going around sacrificing babies to an altar, it doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter if I've been validly ordained as the Pope. If I start doing that, I'm absolutely no longer a Catholic there and then by the fact of what I'm doing. And as a result, I have no power to speak anything for the Catholic Church because I am no longer Catholic. I'm completely showing and demonstrating that I'm no longer a Catholic. Now, Vatican II, if you accept what is in Vatican II documents, 15 of which are completely heretical, they've got heresy directly in them. There's documents. The only document that doesn't have direct heresy in it is Inter Mirifica, which is one of the first two that was published, which is basically saying that you spread Vatican II throughout the world using all the technology and all the technology that will become available. So while in itself it's not heretical, it is absolutely imprudent at the very least, and in context, the fact that all the other 15 documents have got heresy in it, it is spreading heresy. So it is directly heretical. If you want to get into some of the doctrinal heresies in Vatican II, we can do that. But again, I'll just give you one or two of the big ones, which is that Vatican II states that all sorts of other religions can lead to salvation, and that cannot be true. If there's one true Holy Apostolic Catholic Church, then you're not going to be saved by being a Muslim. It's just not going to happen. And, a lot of people don't like this. It's not polite. People, you're going straight to hell because you're a degenerate, deviant who, does heretical stuff. But that was what the Catholic Church was. And it took about 250 years for the brainwashing of people gently by these Freemasons, which there are documents that absolutely prove that this is what they intended to do, and this is what they did from the 1700s on to the 1800s, which is why Pope Pius X created the Code of Canon Law and made numerous encyclicals against modernism, where he even talks about transgenderism and stuff like that, which is in 1904. He was way ahead. He knew because he had seen the infiltration in the church. So it's not my opinion. It is simply a matter of fact that from Angelo Roncalli on, Pope Pius, Pope John the 23rd, fake Pope John the 23rd, which was, by the way, the original John the 23rd was also an anti-pope, was also a heretic. So that's why the name was available, and another heretic tried to use it again. Roncalli was, he passed one of the first two documents of Vatican II, which has heresy in it, and therefore that makes him a heretic posthumously. He was also Freemason, and he was also invalid elected, which we found out later. But even just at the time when we didn't know these things for sure, we could still say he was a heretic pope because he passed one of the first two documents, which was heretical. And of course, Montini afterwards, fake Paul VI. He just promulgated the whole of the Vatican II documents, and every fake pope since has continued to promulgate as absolute heresy. So, to make it in simple terms, it's like you're saying, "Oh, I'm a basketball player," and then you turn up on the basketball court with a golf club, and you just try and hit everybody in the head, and you're saying that you're playing basketball. You're not a basketball player, and you definitely are not part of the NBA. So, simple terms, that's where it's at. It's not my opinion. Anybody that knows anything about basketball would say this guy is just crazy. He's wrong. He's evil. He's mad. Whatever. But he's definitely not a basketball player.
Right. So you, from what I gather from a lot of your work, you call a lot of popes, you know, a lot of people think that just Pope Francis is the anti-pope. He isn't actually the pope. A lot of people agree on that. But where you cause a lot of controversy is going back much further, as you just did right there, to, I think, Paul, you said John Paul the 23rd, was that right?
No, sorry. So the last valid pope was Pope Pius XII, and he died on the 9th of October of 1958. And there's not been a valid pope since then. Now, that's not just my position. That's the Sede-vacantist position. And just to clarify, there's actually three types of what I call sedes. You know, there's Sede-vacantist, Sede-privationist, and then there is my version of Sede-privationist. Now, let's start with Sede-privationist because it's a little bit easier to explain because it was one of the first ones. Sede-privationist was done by an extremely well thought of theologian who worked for Pope Pius XII. He was a theologian in Rome. He was an eminent authority on the theology of the papacy and so on. Now, because in 1958, it was not provable at that time that Roncalli was a Freemason and had been invalidly elected, although people knew about it. You couldn't prove it. All they could prove was that he approved one of the fake heretical documents of Vatican II, and it was, produced after he died, but he had approved it, so he was a heretic because of that. And then Montini started to produce this Vatican II stuff, and Vatican II only ended in 1965. Now the Church moves slowly, prudently. So Gérard Delariens produced by 1969, which is 4 years later, I think it was called the Ottaviani intervention, because Ottaviani was one of the bishops that realized what these guys were trying to do, and he tried to stop it. And Delariens basically, at the time, was very confused. It was like, what is going on? Who are the fake bishops? There was a lot of Freemasonic infiltration. So it wasn't clear who was a valid bishop and so on. So out of prudence, he basically said, this Delariens guy said, well, look, maybe the Pope was validly elected by valid bishops. It's possible. But he's acting like a heretic. And therefore, while he might be materially validly elected as a Pope, he is spiritually a heretic and should not be listened to. Now, that was an absolutely extremely charitable interpretation, because regardless of whether you were validly elected or not, if you act as a public and notorious heretic, you instantly, as Canon 188 Part 4 specifically states, instantly, and as a result of the law itself, and without any pronunciation, any judgment, or anybody having to say anything further, are absolutely excommunicated. But what I think was Delariens was trying to do, he was trying to give the fake popes an out and the fake bishops an out, and sort of like, well, you guys repent, you'd like agree that, this is not kosher, sort of thing. With hindsight of the next 60, 70 years, we can tell without a shadow of a doubt that those popes were all fake popes, and that all the bishops that voted them were fake bishops. And in fact, there isn't a Catholic left in the Vatican as we stand today. So that's not my opinion. That's just the Sede-vacantist position. Now, so the Sede-privationist position, as Delariens had interpreted, is not accurate, because these guys are not validly elected, because they're elected by bishops and priests and so on, and cardinals that are not bishops, that are not cardinals, that are not priests, because they themselves are public notorious heretics who have been teaching Vatican II for the last 60 years, and therefore they can't validly elect anybody because they're not Catholic, they're excommunicated, they're heretics. But this wasn't clear in 64, 65, 67, There was, however, Bishop Thuck, which was a Sede-vacantist bishop who realized he was a bishop. He was made ordained before Vatican II, so validly ordained, and realized that Vatican II was absolute heresy. And as a result of that, he ordained a bunch of other people as bishops and so on. And they're what they're known as the Thuck line of bishops. So the apostolic tradition of apostolic succession from one bishop to the next and to the next has been carried through by this Archbishop Tuck, which, is very much a parallel to what happened in the Arian heresy. In the Arian heresy, pretty much everybody became an Arian except for Athanasius. Athanasius was one hard-headed who got exiled a number of times by different emperors because he was like, nah, these guys are all heretics. And there was a phrase that they were using, was, to do with the credo. And the real Catholics were saying, you have to say this phrase in order to be a Catholic. And the Arians even said, okay, we'll say the phrase, but they said it in words, but they didn't mean it in spirit. And Athanasius stuck to his guns and said, nope, you're still a heretic. It doesn't matter that you say the right words if you don't follow through. And which is very much what the Freemasons, Satanists, Gnostics do. They pervert language, they pervert words, and they pervert the intention, the spiritual intention of what is clean, true, beautiful, and honorable. And if you're on Social Galactic, you'll see this fake that's been going on and on and on, trying to protect Milo the Freemason, which have been, and they just try and change words and the meaning of words and just lie as they breathe. So Athanasius was one of the very few and only bishops that held his guns, and Arianism, as a result of it, eventually died out because one guy held to his guns. So Bishop Tuck created a bunch of other bishops, some good, some bad, but they are the line of bishops that is the most valid, and there are a lot of valid bishops, Stiver, there's various valid bishops that come from the Tuck line. And so then there is the Sede-vacantist. So that answers the Sede-privationist position, which is now sort of invalid. But the Sede-vacantist position is also a little bit invalid because the Sede-vacantists are saying the chair is empty. Well, that is obviously not the case. The chair is not empty. It is filled with an impostor. And that's where I get my term Sede-privationist, because the chair is not empty. It is filled with somebody who's preventing a proper pope from filling it. So it's preventing privation of filling the church, the chair properly. And that is my I'm trying to rename Sede-privationism as the more correct technical term, although I don't mean it as the Lauriers meant it. I mean, I'm more on the Sede-vacantist side, as in there has been no valid pope since 1958, and not validly elected either. But there is somebody preventing us from having a proper pope. So I hope that explains it. And I'm sorry if my answers are too long. Just cut me off if I'm going on too much.
No, like I said, I'm not joking when I like the long answers. So it sounds like this is something that has just happened historically with the Catholic Church, the need to preserve it. This isn't the first time there's been an infiltration, from what I'm understanding. And I mean, you can look back at church history and see that as well. Now, I want to touch on something a little bit different, though. The Novus Orcos Mass. I've heard you refer to it as that. Yeah. And could you explain what that is? I know it's in line with Vatican II, and you in the church, the true church, would consider it heretical, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it is, absolutely. So what happened is, again, one of the various popes wrote, and it's a papal encyclical, Quo Primum. And it's about a page long. And in essence, by the way, it's at the back of my book, Reclaiming the Catholic Church. I've got that one of the appendixes, so you can read it for yourself. Basically, what Quo Primum says is like the Latin Mass is the only valid Mass. It shall never change for time immemorial. It has been the same for hundreds of years. And up until 1958, you could go to a Catholic Mass in Vietnam, in China, in America, in Europe, Africa, in Australia, and in Antarctica, if they ever had one there, and it would be identical. It would always be the same Mass. And now the Latin Mass has got a number of traditional rituals that all have meaning. Every movement in the Latin Mass has a meaning, because you have to keep in mind that many Catholics were, throughout the 2,000 years, some of them were illiterate. There was a lot of very good Catholics that couldn't read. They were illiterate peasants, but they were Catholics nonetheless. Why? Because they listened to their priests, and they understood the movements, even the drawings of the, in the church, there are like stained glass windows that are depicting certain scenes from the Bible, from the Gospels. And they're very rich with tradition and meaning and so on for people who couldn't read. And of course, there is the Protestant lie that the Catholics didn't want people to read Bibles and so on. It was absolute nonsense. Anybody who believes all the lies that have been told about the Catholic Church, I suggest a very good book called Bearing False Witness by Rodney Stark. Now, the interesting thing is Rodney Stark is not a Catholic, but he is an honest man, and he's a historian, and he absolutely hates people who just make stuff up in history. So he names and shames his own colleagues and himself, because he's made some errors in the past when he was younger, and in his later books he corrects himself and he says, oh, I was wrong there because I didn't do my own research and I used that guy's work who was wrong and he was lying and he was making it up. So I really like him. But anyway, the point is that the Mass had to remain changed. It was a papal encyclical that had to stand for all time. And the Novus Ordo Mass, which of course I use a play on words, it's supposed to be Novus Ordo, New Order, as in New World Order, as in Freemasonic, Satanic New World Order. But I call them Novus Ordo, the new orcs, same as the old orcs. They're just there to destroy and eat everybody alive, and that's what orcs do. That's what they do. New orcs, same as the old orcs. So they changed the Mass and they've made it absolutely heretical. It's a travesty. It's really a disrespectful parody of the actual Mass. And if you have attended a Latin Mass, and I'm curious to know whether it was a Novus Ordo Latin Mass or a real Latin Mass, because even not all Latin Masses are valid, because what happened is when they changed the Mass, people like J.R.R. Tolkien, for example, was one who gave all his answers shouting in Latin because he didn't agree with the New World Order nonsense. So a lot of valid Catholics knew that something was up, and that they sort of rebelled to the point where they sort of allowed, oh, okay, well, you can still have the Latin Mass. What they did in the Mass, you join the Pope with the Mass. So you sort of say prayers for the Pope. Now, if the Pope happens to be a satanic, heretical, pedophile protecting scumbag like Bergoglio or one of the other guys, and just so you know, fake Pope John Paul II, Wojtyla, and Ratzinger, who was also in the Nazi Youth, these guys went to bless Freemasonic temples masquerading as churches in a city. So if you know your history, it's easy to see that these guys are not Catholic. But anyway, to get back to the original point, when you join a heretic with the sacrifice that Jesus Christ did for all of us, that is absolute heresy. You're basically joining a satanic pedophile protector like Bergoglio with our Lord Jesus Christ. That is blasphemous. It completely makes a mockery of Mass, even if it's in Latin. And that is called una cum Mass. Una cum is Latin for one with. Now, you cannot be a Catholic and be one with a Satanist who's protecting pedophiles like McKenna or whatever his name was, McCormick, I forget his name, and all the other ones, including that Mexican priest that raped like 30 little girls between the ages of 5 and 10 while he had AIDS and he didn't even get defrocked. So Bergoglio is an absolute pedophile defender. He's associated with people that traffic children and that are being to court in Argentina for trafficking children, and was Bergoglio's boyfriend. He was going to the Vatican every.
Bergoglio, that's the Pope Francis, right? I know you wouldn't consider him the Pope.
No,
but
no, he is not. He's not a Pope. He's a pedophile protecting scumbag, and I will never refer to him as Pope Francis. He took the word of one of the Francis of Assisi, one of the greatest saints that ever lived, to besmirch his name, and that's what these guys do. So yeah, Bergoglio, Jose Maria Bergoglio is his name, and he's not a pope. He's not even a Catholic. He's not a bishop. He's absolutely a satanic scumbag. And these guys, you can't join them with the Mass. That would be like saying, what they do in the Black Mass, they will try and steal hosts. That's why also giving the host in the hand is heretical and blasphemous. only the priest should touch the host and put it directly on your tongue. Because what some people did is they will take this host and then they will hide it, and then they will use it in a black mass where they do all sorts of things like mix it with semen, menstrual blood, and all sorts of scummy stuff. And it's a similar sort of thing. You're mixing the sacrifice of our Lord with a satanic pedophile protector. It's just it's wrong. So an una mass is wrong and it's not valid, and it's not a Catholic mass. So you can only have masses now the same way that you would have a mass when a pope died, which is called an interregnum, which is Latin for between realms, because the pope is considered also the king of the papal states originally, which got handed over by Mussolini. The fascists sort of took those away and whatever. But anyway, so between popes, when one pope dies and another pope gets elected, people still give a mass. Bishops still do their thing. Priests still do their thing. But of course, they don't join it with any name of any pope, because there isn't one, having to elect one. And that is what we are. We're in the longest interregnum that ever existed, 60, 70 years. But I want to point out that interregnums lasted for years before, 2-3 years without any pope. And there has been an analogous situation where you had up to 3 popes at once for a period of about 70 years, where you didn't know who was the real pope, because there was like 2 and then 3, and it's like, well, is it this guy, is it that guy? It was very hard if you were a Catholic at the time, especially without the internet and all that stuff, to know who was the real pope. And it's only after the fact that it got decided, oh, well, this guy was having this position, this guy was having this position, so clearly this pope was an anti-pope. But that only got figured out maybe 20, 30 years after these fake popes died. So there have been analogous situations in the church, so the Novus Ordo Mass is absolutely heretical, and it is a parody. I've attended one of those masses before I was baptized. I started going to them originally because I was trying to figure out what was going on. Then I found the Sede-privationist Mass, and I went to them to just watch. I wasn't obviously taking part because I wasn't even baptized. And then eventually I went back. It was on Easter, and I went to a Novus Ordo Mass given by what I think was an ignorant priest. I didn't sense that he was a satanic Freemason. He was a little Indian guy who probably just went through seminary. It's an easy life and you don't have to work. And he didn't know anything. He probably doesn't even know what Vatican II is. And I think he tried his best to do what he thought was right. But it was an absolute parody. I walked out of it halfway through it. And the reason I walked out of it is because I thought that priest was ignorant and innocent in his form. Because if I had thought that he was intentionally doing that parody, I would have been unable to stop myself from going up to him and probably bodily trying to throw him out of the church. So it was just a disgusting parody and absolutely invalid and not to be in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. So you touched on Rodney Stark. He's a wonderful author, by the way. I bought his book, God's Battalion, which completely changed my position on the Crusades. I'm one of the few people, actually the only person I know in real life that actually can justify the Crusades. I understand why they took place. And so I actually have sympathy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I want to mention, because you brought him up, I think where you were getting at, I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the church actually taught people how to read. Like they didn't not teach people. They actually taught people how to read. And I believe I learned that from Professor Rachel Fulton, I believe is her name, who you've had on your show as well. Yes,
Rachel Fulton Brown, yeah. She's very good as well. She I've had an interview with her on my video channel. You can look for it. I like her very much. She delves into the medieval Catholicism and the richness of it in a absolutely stunning way. She refuses to be drawn into who is the real pope, who's the fake popes. I understand that. She's an academic and she works in academia. And she's a lady, so that's fine. I think crusaders need to be men. So
yeah,
and she does excellent work. Her historical work on Catholicism is second, I think.
Yeah, I've actually I bought a subscription to Unauthorized TV specifically for Owen Benjamin, because that's how I discovered everybody from Vox Day to you to Professor Fulton.
Yeah.
So Actually, on there, I started watching some of her lectures on Catholicism, which are very, enlightening. So I, recommend everybody to go check that out for sure. Now, when you said that if that priest that you thought was ignorant actually was, had knew what he was doing, you would have handled the situation in a much different manner. So I know in your book, I haven't read it, but from the summary and from what you describe and just what you talk about on your show, you're talking about reclaiming, retaking the Catholic faith and restoring it. So how does one go about that? I mean, I know you're kind of different than most people, as in, you don't really hesitate. I can't say that, but you're not adverse to violence from what I pick up on, but a lot of people aren't that way. So how does one actually go about, what you're trying.
Okay, so let's put it into context, right? Because the Catholic Church is called the Church Militant while we're here on Earth, and that is because we are soldiers in God's army. We are in enemy territory. We're under the domain of Satan. The whole Earth is under the domain of the Prince of the Air, or Satan, Lucifer. He's got a million names. But that is, see in the Bible, it's very clear. And if you just look around, some of the proofs of Catholicism being correct, because he's, the imprint, the eternal psychopath hating us with all his might is everywhere. So as a Catholic, you have basically two options as a man. To be either, let's say, a physical layman that is willing to fight the church physically as well, if necessary. Another is to be a martyr, and those are the saints, and they are obviously a much higher. You said at the beginning, I think, before we started, that you sort of not a Catholic because you can't stand the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, but bear with me because I'll come back to it when we're finished. Maybe remind me to call you up on a couple of things. But the point is, if you are, just an ordinary layman, a good father who doesn't want to fight, he's not violent, he's just a good guy who's just trying to be a good husband, be a good father, have his kids, teach them well, teach them trade. Maybe he's a blacksmith, maybe he's a guy who fixes cars, maybe it doesn't matter, he's a farmer, or he's an artisan, or he's a painter, it doesn't matter. That's just a normal citizen. That's like 80% of human beings, if not 90%, would fall into that category. And that's just a good Catholic dad trying to do his best to provide for his family and so on. If you're a good Catholic mom, we get 95% of women, 99% of women would fall into the category to be a good mother, to be a good wife, to just teach the children, help your husband, and that sort of thing. And it's a loving thing to be one of those people. They're what I call, and I don't mean Spanish, citizens. They're citizens in the so-called Catholic village. They are villagers. I am not one of them. I was born different. I was born with a soul that's shaped different. I didn't choose it. It's not. I don't think I'm better than everybody else. In fact, in many ways, worse than most people. But I was born with a fighter's soul, warrior soul. So my job would be to stand on the walls of that village and protect it. And if need be, charge outside of the walls and take out whatever is becoming a problem. Because I don't want to wait until they're inside attacking my friends, my villagers, my citizens, my wife, my kids. As it happens, my wife is more of a Joan of Arc type. The average citizen that lives inside the Catholic village. I don't want those guys to feel any of the things I am willing to face, and that I have faced, and that I'm willing to face till the end of my breath, because they're not built for that. He's built to be a good farmer. He's built to be a good painter. He's built to be a writer. He's the guy that when I come out bloody, if I'm still alive off the walls, when it's my turn to take a break, he's the guy that makes my life worthwhile. He builds something that's beautiful. He paints a painting that lets me wonder how his skill is amazing and how did he do that, and it's beauty that relaxes my brain. before I gotta go back out there and get covered in, liquor of the Freemasons, because they don't really have blood. I don't consider them humans. They're demonic spawn. But some of us, that's our job. And then there are the peoples above us, martyrs. Now, martyrs don't necessarily need to be priests or bishops. Very often they are, because somebody who dedicates his life and gives up the ability to be married and so on, dedicating their life to be a priest, they're making a huge sacrifice, and they're clearly a step above warriors. I don't think warriors are a step above the normal villager. I don't think so at all. We're a kind of a necessary evil, because we are living in the domain of Satan, and to a certain extent I think we're worse than villagers. We're the lowest rung of the ladder, but we're necessary, and because we're necessary, that gives us a little bit of leeway with if you take David, he was kind of a scumbag. I mean, he killed one of his best friends, just banging his wife, but he would love God. Why? Because he fought. He fought. So there are different tiers: villager, warrior, which is gray area. In some ways, we get sort of given some leeway, but in other ways, we're scum of the earth. And then you got martyrs. Martyrs are the top. Martyrs are the top. These are the guys that will not do violence. They will go to their death smiling, willingly, happily, because by doing so, they show the true love and dignity and lack of fear and courage of true Catholics. So those are the three rungs, the three choices that you have as a man. You got to pick one of them. Now, I didn't get to pick. I am, and I believe that most of us are what we are. I don't know that you can choose. I have no intent, and I'm telling you right now, before God is my witness, I will drop to my knees and beg God, please don't make me a martyr. And I know that places me on a lower rung. If, when we do go to heaven, if I ever get there, because my time in purgatory is going to be long, my friend, and some guys are staying there till almost the end of eternity. I hope I'm, because purgatory is hell. So I don't want to be there at all. I think, unfortunately, I'm probably going to be spending quite a long time there. But even if that's the case, and I'm like, dude, I don't want to be a martyr, because a martyr is the kind of guy that lets his wife and children get murdered, get nailed to a cross without fighting back, and I can't do that. That's not my nature. I am going to be taking as many heads as I can. When they come for me, if they come for me like persecuting, killing, I'm not quietly going to get eaten by the lions. I'm going to be cut down Roman legions that are coming for me, and I'm going to try and take as many of them with me as I can. That's how I am. So you're not wrong when you say that I'm not averse to this, but again, Catholic context. And in a Catholic context, you're allowed to do violence if it's just war. In other words, a war that is just, or if you're defending innocence, or if you're defending yourself. And in that case, it can even be preventive, because you don't have to wait for your house to be surrounded by guys who are going to nail the door shut and set it on fire when your wife and kids are inside. If you know they're coming, you can start to take them out and away. Because again, logic, reason.
Exactly. No, and I was just about to say, it's very logical and consistent with what the entire Bible talks about, how God is.
Yeah.
And you're actually the first person I discovered who would actually honestly say that, no, there is a warrior class. That's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a necessity in the world we live in. And that to me always made sense, because when I started off my spiritual journey in Christianity, I began as a fundamental Baptist. And I read all Baptist history books. And as soon as I read the first one, I was like, this is bullshit, man. This isn't real. There's just so much inconsistency. And one of the things that I would press my pastor on at the time was war, actually, because a lot of Christians are just so, the way I phrase it is pussified. And
they're not Christians, they're churches.
Fair enough. I could definitely see that. Fair enough. And so what I was asking my pastor, I was like, so let's say another religion, unsaid religion, came over on our church property and started up another church. And then they began to, and it was nice at first, and you didn't see, there was no external bad behavior taking place. But inside, they were conspiring to do something to our church and replace it. What do you do then? Do you just let them slowly tear down our church, or do we fight against them? And then the response was always, that's a property dispute. That has nothing to do with God. And it's like, there's no consistency. Like, are you kidding?
You see, but this is why that's what allowed the Vatican II to happen. Catholicism civilized the world, and then everybody got soft, and all the priests and all the bishops and even the laymen, they all became like, oh, well, it's a benefit of the doubt. No. Do you know who one of my character models that I hope to, that I aspire to be as good as he was? And he was an absolute ruin of a human being. And that is Jean-Pierre Le Valette. He was the chief of the Knights of Malta, who at 7 years of age, wounded in the leg, with no armor, stood on the walls defending against the Muslim with his two-handed sword, swinging wildly away, chopping ahead. And all his men were like, please come down from the wall. You're in danger of dying and you're our chief. But he did it because he knew, like, hey, on the walls, a single man, and they were all wounded. They were all half dead. He's fighting as hard as they've ever fought, just because out of duty and an honor and a sense of like, well, my 71 and he's wounded in the leg and he's not even wearing his full armor. He's fighting. Oh, got my armor and I've got one arm that works, So they're all going to be there. And his men were imploring him, please come down. And his statement to them was, I've lived a full life, and if I die in battle, what better way to die? What a guy, right? But what most people don't know, Jean-Pierre Le Valette, he had two illegitimate children.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
He was banking. Yeah, so what people don't know about him, he had two illegitimate children. He was banking wives of various nobles, and he killed a man for blasphemy by beating him to death, spent some time in a galley as a slave, and went to jail for beating this guy to death for blasphemy. I don't know exactly how he got out. So he wasn't exactly, by the time he was the chief of the Knights of Malta, another thing he did, which horrified the Knights, was when Muslim captured some Knights, they would beat them to death by hitting them on the bottom of their feet, which is called bastonada. They would kill you by beating your feet so much that they would crack the bones and eventually you die. Horrific way to go. While they were crucified, and then they would float the into between, in Malta, there's like two castles sort of facing each other, and in between they would float the bodies down the river. So, the Knights, and Jean-Pierre Le Valette said, right, bring up all the all the Muslim prisoners, brought them all up, decapitated them all, which was like, but wait, the prisoners were supposed to have, Christian charity, cut all their heads off, loaded the cannons with their heads, and shot their heads into the Muslim encampments. That's a man after my own heart. I understood when I read that part, I burst out laughing because I'm like, oh yeah, he gets it. Now, as I said before, I'm not against violence when it's required. Is violence the way of God? No, it's not. Killing is always wrong. I've always believed that since I was 15, 16, and I thought it through. And I was pretty atheist then. Killing is not the way of man. It is not the right way. It is not the way of God. But we are not living in the city of God. We're living in the dominion of Satan. And over here, despite what people say, two wrongs don't make a right. Yeah, well, some people have to do maths. Because two minuses make a positive.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, no, and that's
and there's a lot of churchianity, a lot of fake churches that are like, turn the other cheek means you should let somebody rape your wife in front of you and not harm them, maybe offer them a glass of water because they might be thirsty. No, turn the other cheek means personal offenses to you should be ignored. And I have, unbelievably for people that think they know me from, YouTube or whatever, and they haven't got a clue. They don't know a damn thing about me. I've had offenses done to me personally of a level that most people would consider acceptable for those people to be hung, drawn, and quartered, that I've just ignored. But offenses to people that I don't even know go against justice and God and so on, even before I was a Catholic, that stuff doesn't wash me. and I'm going to hunt you down. If I've got any power to do so, I will wreck your life as much as I think is required. And it's got nothing to do with me personally. It's not a personal thing. It's got nothing to do with anything you've done to me personally. It's got to do with a sense of justice. And, it's funny because, it's funny to the people who get it. Who like people that have been like in special ops and that actually get it, they understand this. But the way I say it is like, God acts in mysterious ways, and sometimes that's me. And I really mean that, because it's not an arrogating to myself the power of judgment. I don't have any power of judgment over anybody. I don't judge anyone about anything. But if you rape a little kid and I catch you in the Gobi Desert where there's no cameras, you're not leaving that place. You're going to be buried in the sand. And I don't care that I don't know that kid. If I have absolute proof to my satisfaction that you did that, you raped a little 2-year-old, and we're now in the Gobi Desert, and I find out, you're going to disappear. And I don't care about the human laws regarding that, and I don't care about anything, because I know that in the world that we live in, that kind of person needs to be removed from society. And since I don't have the power to put him in a cage for the rest of his life, but if I'm in the Gobi Desert and there's no cameras, we can have an accident
too. So I'm not sure if you've looked at any of the archive videos I have, but I've spoken to a lot of transhumanists, and I've spoken to the co-founder of the Mormon Transhumanist Party, or Association rather, and then the Christian Transhumanist Association.
Oh my God. I have to apologize because.
Go ahead. It's all good. It's all good.
No, sorry. I have to apologize because I have no knowledge. For all I know, you could be a Freemason trying to trap me. I don't care. I had no time to look at your site. So I don't know anything about you. But it's very interesting. You've interviewed a bunch of Satanists. Do go on.
If you want to call them that, yeah. So what I was going to say is that a lot of the belief there is to end all suffering and to have no violence. And that never made sense to me, as we were already talking here. Like, there always has to be a sense of justice in some way. I've always resonated with that. But what I will say that I know is maybe you'll see my inconsistency here because you're a very smart guy. But I actually have a different opinion than you when it comes to, killing isn't necessarily right. It isn't the just way. I tend to take a more naturalist view, and I'm like, well, the world's all filled with animals killing animals. I consider humans to be a different form of animal, so I'm like, this isn't any inconsistency here.
I can absolutely relate to that because I had the exact same view before I became a Catholic. Absolutely, exactly the same. In fact, I'll go a step further. I come from a family of hunters, and as a little kid, the sight of blood used to make me feel a bit uncomfortable. By the time I was 15, I was bushing antelopes in Africa, so the sight of blood didn't bother me at all by then. But I'll tell you something. By the age of 16, 17, 18, when I had sort of thought through a lot of sort of philosophical concepts, I came to the conclusion that killing evil human beings was less of a sin than, going duck hunting. I mean, the duck didn't do a damn thing to me. He's not hurting anybody. The duck, he's just flying around and, breeding and creating little ducklings. And I'm just blowing them away because I like to eat ducks or I like to shoot ducks, and both, we're hunters, so we ate everything we got. But it's just, there are some people out there that are raping kids, defrauding banks, stealing from old ladies. I see a cockroach run across the thing, and just because I don't like him, I squash him, right? Cockroach, I don't care. I'm asleep at night. But a guy who's defrauded of old ladies, well, you go bury him in a shallow grave, and all of a sudden you're a guy. I never understood that. So I relate very well to what you're saying. Now, as a Catholic, there's a difference only in that, the commandments have been perverted, especially, the King James Bible. Now, King James was a homosexual Freemason, and the King James Bible has got over 33,000 errors of translation. So, it gets translated as do not kill, one of the commandments. It's not true. The actual commandment is do not murder. And they agree with that. Murder is wrong.
I always
Killing,
make the distinction
sometimes
because
necessary.
people think they're synonymous, killing and murdering, but it's two different things.
Absolutely different things. So I relate that as a Catholic to explain it. Say it this way: shooting a duck might be necessary if you're hungry, if you're starving, and whatever. We eat beef, we eat pigs. One of my things is that where people should be vegan or not. No, I think vegans are idiots, but I do believe that if you want to eat meat, you should have to butcher your own animal. You should have like a little credit card and like, oh, you've eaten 20 chickens. All right, now you have to go spend a day at like a chicken farm where you twist the neck of 30 chickens so that, you fill up your little cart. You like to eat beef? Oh, once a month you got to go butcher a couple of cows. You like to eat, antelope? You got to go and shoot some antelopes. That would make a whole bunch of people go vegetarian, but not me. Okay. But I'll tell you something, I've hunted my whole life as a kid. I'm 52 now. And the idea of hunting now, I've got pheasants on my farm, and they're not proper pheasants. These are like, pheasants that get released for the hunters. And they're basically like chickens. I mean, I can walk up to, because I've been a hunter all my life, I know how to walk without me. I can walk up to 2-3 meters to these things. I could probably catch them with my hands if I really spend enough time on it. And there's people around here that, not on my farm, because you're not coming on my farm to shoot, but, there are people that shoot these things. And it's like, what are you doing? You might as well shoot a chicken. Get a chicken and shoot the chicken. It's the same thing, So that's not hunting. And I don't particularly, the idea of killing some animal for sport doesn't appeal to me at all anymore. Now, if they gave license for politicians, I mean, I'd be out there for weeks at a time, man. I would just take a lot of ammo and just water, I'd come back all bedraggled, with a beard, and I was like, oh, I had a good one. I couldn't carry them all back, the car's full, and so's the other car and the truck, but we had a good month, But they don't allow it. It's kind of illegal and stuff.
I know we're having fun here. I want to tie this back into what you were talking about, the tiers, that little hierarchy you were talking about, the villagers, martyrs. And when you reference in the Bible, it says, turn the other cheek. Well, what I think people fail to realize as well is that Jesus was at the top. So he was the martyr. He was the example of what the ideal human should be doing. However, not everybody's built that way. So using that analogy to, apply that to everything in life is nonsensical, because like you said, everybody, I'm in the same opinion as you that, you're born a certain way. You can't change the way you're born as far as whether or not you're a warrior, villager, or martyr. That's just something and Jesus was just the martyr. And that's what he was showing is the top class.
A slight correction that, like, you said not everybody is built like Jesus. No one is built like Jesus. He was unique, and he was the only perfect being. With the exception that Mary was immaculate, which we won't get into because that would be or like with a bunch of Protestants fighting you and whatever. But well, the thing is, if I had to compare myself to somebody in the Gospels, I think that the closest thing to what I am would be either Paul or maybe Longinus. Paul was persecuting Christians. He was killing them. He was a guy that was killing Christians because like these damn heretics are like trying to like come up with this crap new religion that is absolute nonsense, and they're just being disrespectful to the true religion. So I'm going to kill as many of them as I can. And he falls off the horse, goes blind for 4 days, and sees Jesus saying, "Hey, why are you persecuting my people?" And he's like, "Oh, I was just totally wrong." And I've had that experience. Longinus was the guy who spear in the side of Jesus to make sure he was dead. So clearly didn't think this guy was the king of anything. And he said, let me just stick him like a pig. And it's like a little drop of blood landed on him. And he's like, oh my God, this was God. It's just people that are just so wrong that they wake up. They're like, man, I've been just on the wrong side. So I relate to that experience. And to get back to, if I can just turn it back on you a little bit, about, the reason you're not Catholic is because you don't like the hierarchy. But that's a question. Jesus Christ himself, as the second coming, comes down from the skies, stands in front of you and goes, Louis, would you subject yourself to me? What do you say?
Well, you put me in a tough spot here. I would, I don't know what I would say, honestly. I don't know what I would say because it would be so surreal. I wouldn't know if I'm hallucinating or if it's legit. So I don't know what I would say.
No. So let me make it real clear for you. You literally see Jesus on a white horse coming out of the clouds, with his feet because of the blood of the saints and all that, and comes, everybody's seeing the same thing you are. Everyone around you is seeing exactly the same thing. And he goes, Louis, you had a talk with a guy a long while. I just want to nail you down on this. Are you going to subject yourself to my rule? Yes or no? What are you going to say?
Well, I would say no, and I would just add something to that. If in the Bible, Jesus also says, don't go looking for the kingdom of heaven because the kingdom of heaven's in you. Don't believe anybody who's saying it's out there, it's out here, he's coming, because it's inside of you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But he is the King of Kings.
I have a different view on that, and I guess I'll go into my view on that. I have a belief based on my reading of the Bible and my understanding of my own spiritual, experiences. Paul in the Bible also says that Christ is within you. I look at that as all humans are actually can achieve what Jesus achieved, and that Jesus is just the ideal man.
Yeah, well, Jesus himself said that.
I'm sorry?
Jesus himself said that.
Yes, and he said that we can do better things than him. So, and from my understanding, that Jesus calling himself the Son of Man was him, talking to humanity, because the Son of Man actually means, to humanity, if I'm not mistaken. And so, that's the way I kind of view it: is that we're all in this.
To get into the Old Testament and what the Adami means, and it gets complicated. But I see where you're coming from. I think I figured out what the situation is there. So I'm guessing. In fact, no, I'm not guessing. Based on what you've told me, I can tell a number of things about you. You've never served in the military, and you've never done any serious martial arts. Am I correct?
No, I actually wrestled for 4 years in high school, and yeah. So, if you would consider that a martial
wrestling is no wrestling is.
I also boxed.
Wrestling is okay. Wrestling and boxing are the peasant version of martial arts. And I'm not disparaging you by saying that. I'm just saying they don't have a hierarchy as much because they're focusing on technique more than anything else. Okay. My point, did you do the boxing?
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry?
How long did you box for? How long did you box for?
Well, it was nothing actually sanctioned. My dad grew up boxing and stuff, so I would box with my friends and things like that. So it was nothing professional, but my dad was a really good boxer back in the day, so he trained me a lot. And so I always say that I boxed, but I never really actually, did a weight class or anything.
All right. So how old is your dad?
My dad, I believe he's 42, 43.
All right. So he's younger than I am. So let me put it this way. You're 25 now, he's 42. Let's give it another 20 years, 10 years. Let's say when you're 35 and he's 52, he's my age, and maybe you train some more, you become fitter, and you could physically knock him out. You know that you physically could take him. Would you?
Ask it again. You're breaking up, kind of.
Okay, I'm saying, so, your dad's a good boxer. He's now. Let's say give it another 10 years, and let's say you get into boxing more. So you're going to be 35 10 years from now. Your dad's now 52, my age. And let's say at 35, you're fit, strong, and you could take him out as a boxer. You just know that physically you would take him out. Would you?
My dad and I have an interesting relationship. I'll just leave it as that. So I think it would depend. I mean, not just for fun. Okay. I wouldn't just feel like I can do it, but my dad and I, we wouldn't really say that we get along, so much. We've had kind of a rough upbringing, but I have I sympathize with my dad because my dad didn't grow up with a father, so he did the best he can without a dad. So I respect that, but it's just a interesting situation that.
You see, this is really, it's quite revealing because it explains a lot of the issues that you have with authority, and I mean, I don't want to psychoanalyze you or anything, but
cool. I know where you're coming from because I've sort of done this myself too. So I know and I've heard Michael Jones mention this before as well. So yeah, I have a problem with my father.
Okay, so
I can't conceptualize.
Yeah, well, I've got a serious problem with my Jones, as I call him, because he's a fake Catholic and a grifter. So yeah, no, he's no one I respect in any way, shape, or form. But okay, fine. Let's not take your dad. Let's take an old boxer who has trained you for the last 10 years, and he's now 80, and he's taught you everything you know, and you become a good boxer, and you're now like able to I don't know, box professionally. Would you take him out? Would you ever punch him in the head and sort of I can take this guy?
No, I mean, and maybe you think I'm dancing around here, but I wouldn't just do that. Now, if we were in the ring and we were actually like boxing, I think it would be different. Don't you think?
Okay, so no, that's very good. So let's say for whatever reason you end up in the ring with this 80-year-old man who's taught you everything you know. And you physically, obviously, can take him out, even though technically he's much better than you. Would you?
Well, no, and I don't think that's a fair. Maybe I don't see exactly where you're going here, but with Jesus and God, I mean, they're never going to be old and frail in that theology, so it's never even going to be.
No. I'm not. Forget Jesus and God. I'm going to show you something, and it's good that you don't know where I'm going with it because it's going to show you something in a minute. So. You're now 80-year-old guy, for whatever reason, you got put in the ring with him by donkeying, I don't know, whatever. There's some situation comes up that you're now in the ring, Las Vegas with the 80-year-old dude and you. Are you going to take him out?
No, I would obviously go easier on him, yes, for sure.
Well, let's say one of you has to get knocked out. Are you going to take a dive or are you going to knock him out?
I would take the dive.
Right. Why?
Just intuitively, it feels like the right thing to do.
Okay, good. Intuitively. You don't really know exactly why. You can't verbalize it maybe, but intuitively you know that's the right thing to do, right? Right. That's called hierarchy, my friend. Just because he's old and frail and just because you can doesn't make it right. Mm-hmm. He's above you. He's been there for 80 years. He taught you everything you know. And that is deserving of respect and dignity and honor and beauty and all the good things that come with being a Catholic. So you have the potential to be a Catholic. You don't know yet because you're confused and you don't know all of it and you're young and you're still way, way, way ahead of where I was. So, you've got another 22 years to be ahead of me. So most likely you will. That's hierarchy. That is real hierarchy. Now, let me put it to you different. Let's say, same situation. 8-year-old guy trained you, everything you know, but you also find out just before you get in the ring that he raped and murdered 15 little children. Now would you take him out?
Yes.
Hard enough that maybe he dies, right?
Sure.
Right. That's hierarchy.
Yes, and so I don't think though they're. Go ahead.
Now, most human beings do not have the luxury of knowing where they fall in that hierarchy. I do because I know what I am. And that means there is absolutely no shame for me to bow to, in the Catholic Church, the spiritual arm, the priests and the bishops are supposed to, the physical arm, the layman, the warrior class is supposed to be subjected to the priests and the bishops. Now, of course, a bad priest and a bad bishop, that what used to happen in Catholicism and has happened a bunch of times, when you get a bad one of these guys, eventually the layman, and it is the armed version of the layman, not the villagers, but the warrior class, says, you know what, this priest is bad and I'm going to take him out. Because that is what makes us necessary evil. We're the guys that break the rules when they need to be broken. And sometimes they need to be broken. That doesn't mean that the rule doesn't exist. That doesn't mean that the rule is flexible. That doesn't mean that the rule is wrong. But sometimes when somebody is overstepping boundaries and they're not respecting the spirit of the rules, you get a guy like me that breaks the letter of the rules in order to enforce the spirit of the rules, because the spirit is always above the letter of the law.
Now, I want to hear what you have to say about this, because I'm totally in line with a hierarchy. I get that there's hierarchies. However, I don't see how there's a necessity for there to be a God above man. You know, I can just see man being at the top of the hierarchy. There's this divine thing that brings life into existence. I'm not calling it a creator. It's more of a, I guess, a perennial philosophy, if you will. And so why is there a necessity for there to be a God outside of this? Like, we can prove there's hierarchies here in nature. We don't have to go to the metaphysics to say there's a hierarchy above man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know there's hierarchies amongst us. Like, I totally get that. And I respect those.
Well,
like,
it's
just obvious. It's obvious.
very simple. So it is very simple. Now, what you're going to get stuck on is what everybody that isn't quite got there gets stuck on. And it's the same thing. I got stuck on the same thing. So I know what you're going to get stuck on. The actual thing is very simple. The universe didn't just pop out of nowhere. It was created. There is a creator, and he created every single one of us, not some random video game, oh, like whatever happens, happens. But he actually literally knows, as it says in the Bible, every hair on your head. So you matter to him. Every one of us does. And that creator created it this way. Now you can say, but what if I could think of a better system? No. And actually, you don't understand the whole system because you are not God. And it is how it is. You know, if I can make it another way, let's say that, you know, you're a scientist and you create a bunch of bacteria in a petri dish, and they do what bacteria does. You're like one of the little bacteria going, well, but why does there need to be a creator? I'm just here, you know, eating and crapping out stuff. Like, that's what we do, and there's no creator. There's nobody that determines what I have to do or where I have to do it. But the reality is there's a scientist out there that made sure that that particular type of bacteria in that particular type of food is doing what it's supposed to do, and he's trying to check out, oh, is it going to go that way or that way, and how do I find the antibiotic to kill this bacteria off, or whatever. It's so far outside of your ability to deal with that for you to sit there and sort of say, well, I don't believe there needs to be a God. The reality is, mathematically, objectively, there has to be a creator. I mean, I had accepted that even before I became anywhere near anything like a Catholic, which I think you do as well. And the tendency is, when we think that way, we think it's an abstract sort of, you know, cloud in the sky that is kind of smart and figures stuff out. And one of the words, I don't know if you're familiar with it, it's called Theology. It's a brilliant book called Biologist's Mistress by a lady called Alexander something. A very good book, which is basically trying to say, oh, there is an order in the universe, but doesn't necessarily mean there is a God. And there's very clever ways of like trying to pretend that that's what's happening. But once you have these experiences, which for people like myself and possibly like yourself need to be subjective, because there's I've met guys that have reasoned their way to Catholicism because it is a reasonable position. It is a very logical position. I'm not one of those guys, because I was like, man, unless I can touch it, feel, unless I personally have an experience of it, it convinces me that that's the thing. I've had experiences before my road to Damascus moment that would make almost any man become a believer. I've absolutely believed that. I'm not going to get into it because they're really sort of crazy subjective experiences that I can't prove, but I've had experience. Any normal human being would sort of go, dude, you got to believe there is, some afterlife, there is God, there is life after death, all that stuff. But I could always find a skeptical way to sort of go, well, yeah, it could be that, or I could be crazy, or it could be a demon, it could be, I always had an out, always had an excuse for how to, like, well, maybe it doesn't have to be that. And eventually, God's got your number, he'll track you down. So, I don't know how it's going to happen for you, but
my personal view of this is, it's fractal. Like the universe is just fractals, and so God would be essentially the ultimate fractal in which everything else comes from if you dive deeper and deeper and deeper into. Therefore, would you even need the Christian faith to go along? Like, if that makes sense to you, if what I'm saying makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I had an interesting little back and forth with Vox recently, where I don't know if you've noticed, but over the last few years, Vox has become increasingly Catholic, in my view, in his statements, in his blog posts. And at the end of it, I was like, dude, one of these days, I hope that we're going to get a chance to sit down, have a bottle of wine, and get the wife and the kids far away from us, and we just nail this down, because I still don't get, like, what are you, why are you not Catholic, sort of. And it was a very short exchange, but very deep, because I think his response was something like, I don't believe in all these rules. I think God knows our heart. And I was like, man, I agree wholeheartedly with that. Of course, God knows our hearts. And you absolutely need rules, because human beings will eat each other in the street if you don't have them. And he goes, oh yeah, I agree with that. And that's why I'm saying, the theological differences between Vox Day and myself they're minuscule. And I know he has a problem with authority. And, that stuff will get beaten out of you if you go to proper martial arts. I'll give you an example. There used to be this guy who was like some brown belt or whatever, who used to try and lord it over the lower belts until, and I overtook the guy. I became a second little brown belt or whatever. But, he was like, oh, you have to do this. Oh, you have to do that. And I was like, this guy's an idiot. He's nowhere near as good as I am technically. I can beat the crap out of him anytime I want. But just because he's got a little colored belt higher than me, I'm supposed to, like, listen to him and treat, like, what he says as gospel. And I was like, fuck that shit. But then after a while, I was like, well, what does it matter? If I spar with him, I'll beat his ass. And even though, maybe I'll get a beating from somebody else if I make it. But I was good enough, I didn't have to humiliate him. I could just kick the shit out of him and make it look very neat. It wasn't that good. And I was like, well, so what do I care? So he's telling me, oh, do this or sweep the floor or whatever. Yeah, so what? I'll just do it. And that's what I mean by turning the other cheek. It's like, and it's a very important lesson to learn, because you need to be able to just, like, take some shit in life, not because you have to, but because you can. And it's a very important lesson to learn. Once you learn that lesson, a lot of things don't bug you as much. They don't, I had an experience here where I was talking to, like, basically a gangster, and we're waiting at the post office, and some little old dude is there with a mask, and he sneaks in, and he cuts in line, and he goes in before me, and the other guy nearly lost it. We were just talking, why are you letting that old bastard? And I was like, dude, he's old, fucking cares. Because, yeah, but you're in a rush, I'm in a rush, and that son of a bitch, he just crushed the thing, and he knows who he's not. I'm like, yeah, I know he knows, and he thinks he got one over me. But, like, what difference does it make to me? An extra 10 minutes or whatever? I'm having a good conversation with you, cool. And I could see that he was that way, because he was, like, he was older than I was, but he was like I was before I became Catholic, which is like, no, but the principle of justice has been done wrong here. And I'm like, yeah, I know that. You know that. He knows that. God knows that. What, am I going to, elevate my heart rate by, like, 2 beats a minute just to tell the old man that he's an asshole? He knows he's an asshole. It's like, who cares? Just rather have the conversation with you and have another 2 minutes, And it's a very important way of looking at things, which you generally have when you're not a Catholic, because it wasn't a fact of, like, oh, I'm letting the old dude walk in front of me because I'm too worried about telling him to piss off. I got no qualms telling anybody to piss off at any moment in time, at the drop of a hat. But it's not always necessary, and that's I don't know if I'm getting across what I'm trying to explain to you, but there is a hierarchy which it's like if you're a big warrior with your armor on and a 2-year-old kid runs up to you with a plastic sword and really tries to swing at you, what are you going to do? Smack him in the head? No, there's no need. He's not a threat. He's not, it's just a kid. Like maybe teach him how to swing the sword a bit better, if anything, So I don't know. I think the humility of being, there is a humility in being a Catholic. Of course, in my particular instance, not a lot of people would think I'm any kind of a humble guy, but that's, because they know me as some digital format online. I mean,
yeah, no, I'm with you. Like, I know that there's an order to things. I'm all for that. Like, I'm all for hierarchies. I'm a father. I'm a husband. So, I understand that there has to be boundaries set as you're raising your children. I have 2 1-year-olds right now. They're twins. And so it's like, it's a handful. And, right now they're really starting to, the wheels are turning, man. They're picking up on things so quickly. So you have to start introducing some form of discipline as they're starting to walk, get into things. So, of course, there's rules and boundaries, but I feel like a lot of that is arbitrary, honestly. Like, it's really, because you look at other cultures and stuff, the way they can have functional societies, and it can be completely opposite to like what we do here in the Western world. And so,
okay, name one, name two functional societies that are completely different cultures.
I would say like the Chinese culture. They're very functional. They're, I think they're successful. We can debate about their government, and I think I would even say I
would question what you mean by successful.
Well, I mean, they have beautiful cities. They have first world amenities. I mean, they have long life expectancies. They get good medicine.
So you're looking at all the worldly things. Do you know that in Chinese society the individual doesn't exist? Your dead ancestors have more value than you as a living human being.
Yes, I'm with you. I know. Yes, I get that. But I would say overall, they're pretty successful. In worldly things, I mean, isn't that all we can really measure?
Well, no, not at all. Let me put it to you this way. I would rather live the rest of my days in an African jungle armed with, a rifle and a machete and starting from scratch than live in Chinese society.
Fair. I'm not saying I would prefer to live there either. I'm just saying that I would deem them as successful.
But then why are you saying they're successful?
Fair. Okay, you got me. Well, I think another country I can think of is Japan. It's a slightly different culture than the Chinese.
Yes. I'll give you Japan. I will give you Japan. And in my opinion, unless you also consider Russia and the Russian Orthodoxy as an alternative culture, which I would fairly present them as a different culture. They are the only 2 cultures that I would consider functional that are not Catholic.
So then, would you just say that the exception?
They are warrior societies. They're both warrior societies. And they both have a very strong spiritual element. The reason that Japan worked is because of Shintoism. The reason that Russia, and I mean really sort of Russia now rather than Russia Union, and elements that did work in Russia Soviet Union were again because of Russian Orthodoxy. So they have a very strong spiritual element to their civilization. It's not Catholic, but did you know that the Japanese samurai who, Catholics were crucified in Japan, they were murdered because they were trying to spread the gospel. But there were quite a lot of Japanese samurai who became secret Catholics, and we only found this out in the last few decades. They had inside their swords crucifixes. The way a samurai sword is built, there's a part of the sword that is hidden inside the guard, and these guys were Christians. And of course, the Russian Orthodox are not that far from the Catholics. Orthodoxy is not that far from Catholicism. They're schismatics, but a lot of their sacraments are still valid, considered valid, and so on. So, and the noble pagans. I mean, the Roman civilization, of course, was not Catholic until it became Catholic, and it was a relatively successful civilization even before Catholicism appeared on the scene. Those are I would say, exceptions to the rule, because there is such a thing as the noble pagans, if you like. The Russians are a special breed, I would say, because they are schismatic, but they're pretty closely aligned to Catholicism. Every other culture, I would question whether they are successful as such. Possibly the Australian Aborigine, they might have had a culture that you could possibly consider successful in isolation. I certainly wouldn't have wanted to be a part of it, but I would say that under certain parameters, you could consider the Australian Aborigine to have been successful.
Well, then
I would not consider the Amazon tribes.
Yeah, so I have to challenge you a little bit here, and I'm not trying to be a smartass, but when I mentioned China, I mentioned China being successful, but I would prefer to live there. Your response was then why is it successful? So couldn't I just apply that same logic to the tribes that you're pointing to?
Sure. Well, for example, Australia, the Australian Aborigine, I wouldn't want to live there, but spiritually they are pretty evolved human beings. Now, technologically and day-to-day life, I wouldn't want to live that way. But spiritually, they have concepts of, they had telepathy, essentially. These guys meet up without having talked to each other or knowing at specific times and places without having predefined it. They used to do that. I've met a couple of Aborigines that have done some stuff that's just like, what? You're an Aborigine, you haven't got a clue of where I'm from, and you're telling me stuff that there's no way you should know. Nobody has told you. So they have a spiritual reality that is very rich. I just kind of prefer indoor plumbing and shit, as well as the spiritual reality. But it's valid. Similarly, I could live in Japanese society. I could live in Japan. Part of the reason I could live in Japan is because I'm not Japanese. So I would be able to be a bakagaijin, barbarian, and get away with shit that they would have to commit harakiri on. And that's part of the reason why I could live in Japan, because I get along with all their, their philosophy of politeness and so on. I think they're far more evolved than we Westerners in that respect, and everything kind of works. They've got some odd stuff. The women are pretty enough, whatever. If I had to live there, before I was married or whatever, I could live in Japan. It's a very strict sort of society, but I wouldn't have to, as if I were a Japanese very much. I've got a little bit of leeway, so I could be okay there. China, no, I wouldn't want to live there, and I don't think they have any spiritual evolution sort of. It's very, very primitive. While the Japanese spiritual element is very evolved. Shintoism is again, they have elements of this sort of telepathy and knowing each other. The Zen Buddhism stuff is very evolved. Hinduism, Chinese Taoism, they're relatively primitive. Now, there may well be very few, I've met one or two, very highly educated Hindus that understand that their religion has been completely degraded and it used to be something else, but it doesn't exist anymore. It's been sort of wiped out. Maybe 20, 30,000 years ago, there was something real there, but it's been since degraded to the point where it doesn't count. So does that answer your question? I don't know.
Yeah, what do you think about Confucianism then? I know we're kind of bouncing all over the place here, but this is where the conversation...
It's basic. Confucianism is basic. People go on and on about the Sun Tzu, the art of war. It's basic. It's basic. It's people that go crazy about Machiavelli. The prince. Basic. basic crap. If you want a book on strategy, read Suvorov, the Russian general, or Nosho, Miyamoto Musashi. Those are deep.
Is that the Five Rings?
Sun Tzu's Art of War. Yeah, Book of Five Rings. That is profound. Sun Tzu's stuff is like, it's basic shit. I mean, you have the sun at your back. Decide the landscape where you're going to have a war. Like, oh, he was so wise. The prince, Machiavelli, that guy could direct a bunch of trained soldiers to march around the square. They're the gamma of the time who managed to write a book and like, oh, nobody else wrote a book, so he must be really clever. No, I'm sorry, but Vox zone about Eco, Umberto Eco, perfect example. Umberto Eco was a gamma that just read a bunch of books, and the average Italian who went to school at the time that Eco went to school could read Latin and Greek, and the average American, Vox Day's age, hasn't got a clue about Latin and Greek. So your average Italian geek and who read a bunch of stuff to make himself even look smarter, he's a fantastic guy, so well read, so educated. But I read Umberto Eco and I get bored because I'm like, oh, look, he's taking the little snippet here about the Greeks, and he's taking a little snippet there about the legend of Icarus. He's transforming it into another thing. Oh, and he knows a little bit about the anti-gravity stuff, and he knows about the experiments. And it's like, I know all the crap. And he's just like being the typical Italian to look smart. They bore the crap out of me. I
got a Foucault's Pendulum. I think that's what it's called of him. Anyway.
Yeah.
Got it because I heard Vox raving about Umberto. And I was like, I like Vox's writing.
Yeah.
So I'm sure he has good taste.
Yeah.
And so I found it at a used bookstore. And I never got past like the first chapter. I'm like, this is just dry to me. Like,
Absolutely right. Yeah. I it's one of the few books I couldn't fucking get past. I don't know how many pages I read. I don't know, maybe 50, 100. I don't know. It was just like, this is just painful.
I tried to give it a few chapters, but that book, I think back to it like 3 times. Like maybe now I'm in the right mindset to read this, and every time it's.
But you got to keep in mind, like as the Latins say, de gustibus. Like there's no accounting for taste. I mean, Vox reads books of economics for fun. I think I would rather, do Chinese masturbation. I don't know if you're familiar with the joke.
I don't.
This guy walks. He's working as a mechanic, and he comes to work one day, and he's like walking with his legs like a cowboy, really spread apart and really carefully. He's like, well, what's wrong with you? Oh, well, it's just I'm in a lot of pain. Like, why? Did you catch the clap or what? No. Just Chinese masturbation. It's like, what the hell is that? He says, well, you take a hammer and you put your testicles and your dick on an anvil, and then you just hammer away at it. The guy's like, what the hell? What kind of sick thing is that? I mean, you have an orgasm when you miss.
Yeah. Jeez.
When you miss. I mean, reading a tome of economics or Chinese masturbation, it's I don't know which one I'd prefer. Read.
Right.
And that's fun. So that he's just got really odd taste. But I'm not criticizing. I'm not judging him for it. That's what he likes to do. But certainly not my cup of tea.
Right. Like I'm sure you would like I find Confucius writings very enlightening. I actually have all 4 books that the ancient Chinese would study to enter into the political system from the local to the federal level. So I've gotten really into Chinese culture, and But anyway, to tie this all back in, to just circle back around here because we've sort of deviated. It's been fun. I want to go back to why I actually, why I invited you on the show is to talk about the future of Catholicism. So we've talked about how Catholicism is corrupt, how you became a Catholic, and why it is the true church, and what people can do to sort of help out in their own, natural way.
Well, again, it's pretty simple, really. Too long did not read version is we're in one of two situations. Either it's the end of days, and eventually there will be a second coming, and almost all of us will be wiped out, and only a few of us will have any belief left over, because there'll be so much darkness happening that even the root, truly, believers will almost give up just before God comes back, Jesus. So either it's that, or it's just another period of darkness like Arianism. Regardless of which of these two things is, attitude should be exactly the same. You just soldier on, keep fighting, do your best, set fire to enemy encampments to spread the light, and carry on. Now, practically speaking, what does that mean? It means supporting Sede priests, Sede-vacantist priests, probation priests, whatever you want to call them. I just say Sedes for short because there are, the Sede-vacantist, the Sede-privationist, and the correct Sede-privationist term, which is what I think is technically there's Sede-vacantist, but there's somebody occupying the seat. And support those priests, give them, if you're thinking, but how can we when the whole world is against us? Well, nobody's crucifying you and setting you on fire yet in the streets, to light the streets, are they? Because that happened, under Nero, it happened. Christians were being persecuted properly then. You're not there yet, so you're laughing. Well, what's your problem? They didn't have priests all over the place then, did they? I mean, what if you were an Aztec? You didn't even know there was such a thing as Jesus back then, and they were sacrificing 20,000 of you a day, cutting your heart out to, pray to the sun. You're in a much better position. Internet, anybody who cares to spend an hour to trying to find out what Sede-privationism is, or a couple of hours to read the Vatican II heretical documents, you can find out about Sede-vacantism just by typing in Google. Even Google will tell you something about Sede-vacantism. So we're in a pretty good spot. We've got enough bishops. We don't have just one or two. We've got a bunch of them that are teaching. That are a bunch of priests that are teaching. I say, well, I don't have a church within 45 minutes of where I am. So what? You mean what? Why Paul walked all the way to Rome and got his head cut off there to become a martyr to spread the gospel, and further afield? I mean, Thomas was killed, was martyred in India, in Pakistan, as a matter of fact. You got it easy, dude. You just got to sit on your butt and, but to get proper baptized, I'm in Finland and there isn't a proper Catholic church here. I might have to go to Italy. So catch a plane. It's going to cost you $30, Oh, yeah, I might have to do a PCR test. Well, so what? Do it. It's not that hard. It's just, but I don't have a church next door. That's basically what it boils down to. The Crusaders, the guy who in 1095 walked all the way to Jerusalem, getting shot at and darted by random Arabs, Muslims, and then had the Orthodox who called them over to help turn on them and backstab them and also kill them. Those guys, they had mass maybe once a year. Right. They didn't always have a priest with them. They did okay, right? So what's stopping you?
So what is the
basically
I have two more questions for you. The next one,
sure,
the Kurganite, I believe is how you say it. And what exactly is that?
Right. Well, given all the stupidity that's happening, the stupid fake COVID stuff that's going on in that, I was like, well, in England they've changed the law so that any responsible adult can inject your kids at school. Now, if that happens, I was obviously going to go to jail, so I thought, now we better move. So we came to Italy, where they don't have those stupid rules yet. Maybe they'll try and implement them, but there's always homeschooling or what have you. And I got a decent property here with quite a bit of land, so I can cut myself off from the world, and you guys carry on doing your crazy crap out there. But as it happens, there's a bunch of people that like me. Some very loyal henchmen from England wanted to live here and move here, and not just them, like a bunch of families that are coming out to check it out, see what we can do. I've since met a bunch of people here that have had the same idea I have and are busy trying to purchase a property really next door to mine, same size, but they want to build a pretty much a commune of people that do homeschooling with no masks, no backs, all that stuff, grow their own food on the land, which, you know, is unlike the Owen Benjamin version of I'm a homesteader. If you actually want to grow food properly on your land, it's tough, you know. And unlike, again, the Owen Benjamin, where he's obviously got a bunch of people doing stuff for him, and it's still not going very well. He's not self-sufficient. To actually become self-sufficient, to have, you know, solar power, generators, clean water, and to be able to farm the land enough that you can feed all the people that live on it, you need tractors, you need machines, you need to know what you're doing, and you need people. You know, on my own, there's no way that I can farm 5 hectares of land, even if I did have a tractor, which, you know, they're expensive. I don't know enough about it. I've got some really good neighbors, awesome neighbors who are like teaching me a bunch of stuff. But, you know, push comes to shove, I'm a hunter and warrior class. So, you know, if I have to sell my services, that's what I'd be doing. The idea was like, you know, as I said, look, if you guys want to follow me, it's not a democracy. You know, if you know, what a lot of people don't know, or they think, oh, I call myself the Kurgan. I didn't come up with a name. I was named the tribe, if you like, of the Dread ilk that follow Vox Day's blog, and I was commenting on that blog for some time, and these guys just sort of they threw me into the Facebook community that was the Dread ilk. They didn't choose to be in it. I like opened up Facebook and I was like, hey, I've just been joined by force into a group. Like, what's going on here? And they called me the Kurgan because, oh, well, you look like him and you've got the same sort of mannerism. You know, you're like completely undiplomatic and rude, and you just say what you think and you don't care. But, you know, if you look at the Highlander movies, the Kurgan was a cool dude. He was, you know, he was a man. And he knew that Novus Orca were fake Catholics, which is why I'm a bit rude in church. But he respected the holy ground, unlike that Belgian, you know, who cried every time somebody died. So yeah, I don't mind the name quite, but the Kurgan is essentially, I've told people, like, look, if you want to be part of this, if you want to come join me, you know, farm the land, do whatever. It's not a democracy. It's an empire, and it's an empire after the Spartans, because when Leonidas went to like the hot gates to stop the Persians, he didn't command anybody to come with him. He just said, I'm going for a walk. And the 300, his personal bodyguard, to a man, individually said, well, King, if you're going for a walk over there, I'm going to walk with you, dude. And, you know, to a man, they stood next to him and died next to him, because that's the kind of people I want. I'm a leader. I don't want to be a leader. I couldn't care. I just want to be left alone. But you're not going to leave me alone. Fine, I'll become a leader. And I'm going to do it my way and no other way. There's not going to be, well, but, you know, I'm a captain and this guy said, nah. If you want to be on my side of the fence, you're going to do what I tell you. And in fact, you have to be doing what I tell you so well that I don't even have to tell you. You should be able to second guess what needs doing and do it before I even say anything, because that's how it should be. Now, the thing is, I have now got a bunch of people around me that absolutely understand that and live by it. And frankly, half of the reason I was saying that was like so that I didn't get any like these wussies that like, but I have an idea. Like, I don't care for your idea. I don't care. You know, I'm telling you what to do. Do it or get out, sort of, which is horrible, right? It sounds bad and like, well, who wants to be led by a guy like that? But get rid of the chaff. I don't need people wasting my time. Now, the people that are left and the people that are doing this with me, and they're every single one of them that wanted to be here, they are here. You know, it was like, well, there's a couple of guys that digitally sort of were making the right noises, but when it came to the crunch, they just disappeared. But the guys who are here, they're absolutely loyal to a fault. I mean, these are guys I would stand next to in a foxhole I wouldn't step back an inch, because they're absolutely deserve. They give the loyalty and the camaraderie and whatever you want to call it. And you know, we're all human. We all fail. We all make mistakes. I've lost my temper sometimes and said, what the fuck are you doing? And then it turns wrong, which I say, shit, I was wrong. I'm sorry, dude. We move on, and vice versa, you know. so it's really cool because there is no, yes, there's a hierarchy, but it's the kind of hierarchy I like and I respect, and that I would subject myself to as well, which is a little bit Russian. You know, the cosmonauts, yes, they have a hierarchy, like who's the captain, who's the whatever, you know, the sergeant. When they're in space, you know who's the leader? The guy that knows how to do that job. Because if you get a leak, it doesn't matter who's the captain. The guy that knows how to stop that leak in space, he's the boss. He's the absolute emperor in that moment. And everybody, this guy says. And that is pretty much my attitude. You know, I'm older than all the other guys. I've had a very full life. So generally speaking, I'm right most of the time. And even if I'm wrong, screw it. Everybody's wrong sometimes, but you're still going to do what I tell you the wrong way. And we've demonstrated that I'm wrong, in which case I'm like, okay, I was wrong, and we'll do it another way. And that's because there has to be a hierarchy. There has to be a line of command, if you like, especially if and eventually it gets to the point where you are being physically persecuted in a serious way. You don't have time then to sort of say, well, you know, what do you think we should do now? Well, there's a bunch of guys coming here to try and forcibly inject you. You know, you do what I tell you. Because if it comes to that, then, you know, then that's where we are, and you can't be voting on things.
Right.
So
I
hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And hopefully it doesn't come to that. You know, that's something my family's talked about. And actually, we're working towards doing something similar to what you and Owen are both doing. You know, like I'm all for, I think actually that's the way of the future in general, in order to keep some sanity in this insane world, is to have little pockets where, and I'm not big on, you know, what religion you are, but it's something that's orderly and isn't, you know, that at least respects humanity. Whereas where we are right now, there is like no respect for liberty, there's no respect for personal choice or anything like that. So, you know, I think that
here's a data point. Here's a data point for you, sorry to interrupt, but I don't know if you remember, Vox Day years ago was doing brainstorms, and I mentioned in one of his brainstorms, this was before I was a Catholic, it was very shortly after my road to Damascus moment, and I mentioned in one of his brainstorms that I said, the most evolved form of government is city-states, and in the future, Christianity is going to be absolutely pivotal. And he noticed, because it was like, oh, that's interesting that this guy's saying this, because he's not a Christian. He's not even baptized. Because logically, you know, what you said is like, oh, I'm not thinking about what denomination you're on. You will be. You will be, mark my words, because within the next 10 years, 15 tops, and that's because I'm being super, you know, because I want to be right. I'll call it 15 years tops, but I think in the next 5, and certainly probably no more than 10. But I'll say 15, just to be absolutely sure. You're going to realize that the so-called non-denominational / Protestant zeitgeist is going to end up with people eating each other alive like fucking zombies.
You know, I do have to say,
you are going to,
you know, I completely agree with the city-state. That's essentially what I was saying. You know, like that's something I've been talking. Yeah. My wife is the only one that listens to my crazy ideas most of the time, and I'm like, city-states are the future.
You're way ahead of most human beings on Earth if your wife's listening to you, man. You know, you got violent, sell it.
I'm blessed. You know, I'm very fortunate, man. I really am. But no, like I completely agree. City-states are the future. That's just something that I've just been picking up on for, I would say, the better half of like 3 years. Like, this is, everybody that I say this to thinks I'm insane, because they're looking at this, either they're looking at the global takeover, or they can't even envision, you know, global, you know, the globalists taking over, and they just think it's going to be nation states and city states are primitive. I'm like, no, city states is where it's at. This is like the future. Like, I've talked to my wife about getting unincorporated area, like an unincorporated county in America somewhere, and start building up because you can do that here. You can build up your own little government, your little county government. Like, it's so possible. I think that's the way I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
So I kind of forgot where I was going with that, but
well, I mentioned that you're going to find out that
That's right.
so-called non-denominational / Protestant zeitgeist is going to end up becoming zombie world.
Right at the time, thank you for reminding me. Right at that time, I was really entrenched in the Christian faith. Like I would consider myself a zealot. I was one of those people that would say, if you're not Christian, you're going to hell. I had enough confidence in my belief system at that time when I first dove into it. And so what I saw happening there was not first, but this was like as I was becoming more so orthodox, I would say. But what I noticed is that there's a pagan movement. There's this neo-pagan movement, and they too appear to be combating this other agenda that's taking place. And so what I said on one of the live streams I was doing on Facebook, I was like, guys, maybe they're on our side right now, but probably in about, whatever year their time frame will be, they're going to be coming for Christians next. So like I do resonate with that, although I still have, I don't know, like it's just hard for me to really claim I'm like a Christian anymore. I've just, but anyway.
Okay, let me say something to you. Like I don't know. Again, don't take this the wrong way. I'm not judging. I'm not criticizing. I tend to wake people up because of many years of martial arts by slapping them in the face. So here's a thought. You said you were a zealot and you were a Christian. I would say to you that you were a zealot, but you've never been a Christian yet. You were a churchian, and you grew up, and it's not your fault, and you believed a bunch of churchian lies that when examined under sunlight and under reason and under logic make no sense to man or beast. So you threw out the baby with the bathwater because you're saying, well, this is a bunch of crap. This doesn't work. This can't be right. And I used to really believe this stuff. But there was no Christianity whatsoever there. That's that if I had to give you Cliff's notes of how to figure something out, I would say that once you digest that part, then the rest will come.
And I can't say you're wrong. Like a lot of what is drove me away from Christianity is what's taking place right now. I don't want to go too much into it because I've had a freaking community strike for a video. But anyway, so like that is drove, like, because like I said, I went to the Orthodox Church, but then they started going and saying that you need to wear the mask, you need to do X, Y, and Z, and I was like, this ain't right, I'm out. And then I was on the mindset, like you, like even if you have to build the church, start your own church. And so that's what I was all about for a while there too. But I don't know. It just doesn't, like the whole, just a lot of the doctrines I don't really resonate with anymore. Maybe in the future I'll mature into it. But as of right now, a lot of it just doesn't resonate with me. That's because the so-called doctrines you were brought up on are lies. They're not. They're false doctrines. You've been lied to. And I say in the book Believe, which is that short book, it's a lot harder for a churchian to become a Christian than it is for an atheist or an agnostic, because you've been brainwashed by absolute nonsense. And it really is. It's harder. I feel sorry for churchians, the people that were raised churchian, because it's very difficult. And the thing is, here's a couple of data points. There is no Sede church, priest, or bishop that I have encountered that there's a flying rat's ass about masks or vaccines. They could not kill because they're Catholics. Death holds zero fear for them. These guys would come and give you a mass even if you were a radioactive, plague-spewing, Ebola fucking contaminated guy, because they're like, no, we need to give him last rites. He's being eaten alive by bugs that are super contagious. Last rites. That's what they're like. And I've never seen that in any other so-called fake church, from the fake, Masonic pretend Catholics to the so-called Baptists to they're the only church I've seen that they do that with. But you have to read a little bit about Catholic dogma to know why that is. Yeah. No, and I have a little, I would call it a mini library because it's not so big, but I have a few, probably close to near 100 books. And I have a whole section that's on church history because, like I said, I did take a deep dive into the theology, you know, but a lot of it I resonated with the Orthodox, like I said. But experiencing what I experienced at the start of all this stuff, it just made me think that nobody really embodies this. And I'm not saying that you don't. I know there's obviously exceptions.
No, but you know why it doesn't embody it, and the Orthodoxy appeals to Americans very much. And again, I'm going to say stuff that, you know, could be very offensive if you don't understand where I'm coming from. But, you know, Americans have got a 200-year-old history. I mean, their country is like, it doesn't even have 1/10 of the history of my country and my people. And as a result, you know, they're desperately looking for some tradition, something valid, something that's old and new. You know, like my house was built in 1920. It's really ancient. You know, American architect come over to Italy saying, "Oh, look, they've did something wrong. They've said that this church has been here since the year 1020." And the other guy was like, "What's wrong with that?" Well, it couldn't have been because, you know, America was only discovered in, like, you know, 1492. I was like, dude, we've got churches here that have been around since the year 400, and they're just around the corner. You know, what are you talking about? You know, so Orthodoxy appeals to them because it has all the pomp, all the ritual, all the ancient rites of Catholicism, but it's not Catholicism, because as a Protestant imbibed person, and I don't care if you were born Catholic in America, you have been brainwashed by the Protestant zeitgeist that surrounds you, like a fish in Protestant water, and you don't even realize it. Anybody who's in an English-speaking country has been raised with Protestant ideology in their head that is so deep they don't even know it's ideology of Protestantism. So it's absolutely, you know, Catholicism is devil. It's the whore of Babylon. And that's all you've been imbibed in all your life. But now here comes this other thing. Well, nobody said anything wrong about the doctrine. Well, they've got some fancy beards and they've got some pretty cool icons. And hey, they stand in church. That's hardcore. So superficially, it's attractive. And plus, they've got all this mysticism where, well, you know, what really happens, guys? Is there such a thing as, well, it's mystery. You know, it's mystery. Why? You got a fucking brain. Use it. There are mysteries. There are mysteries. In the Catholic Church, there are mysteries, like the Trinity. You know, there are mysteries. But there are not so many as you think there are. It's, again, you know, that refrain that I heard since I was a child, you think too much. And my response to that instantly, even as a kid, was like, nope, it's not me that thinks too much. It's you dumb fucker, that doesn't think enough. That's what's happening.
It's funny you say, I too would always get told that as a kid, and that never made sense to me. I was like, how do you think too much? Like, that makes no sense.
Now, the Orthodox are like, well, it's a bit complicated, so it's just a mystery. It's not a mystery. You know, purgatory, or even, you know, the reason that supposedly Protestantism happened, the indulgences. Indulgence has got an absolutely valid theological point to it, which is you pray for the dead. You know, you pray for your friend. And people, oh, you worship dead people. No, you idiots. You have to understand Latin, and you have to understand what prayer is and what worship is, and the fact that in the English language, you guys don't differentiate because we kind of, you know, Protestant morons. But no one worships the saints. You ask them for intercession because there's no difference for a Catholic between a living person and a dead person. They're still your buddy. They're still somewhere. They exist. So if they're in purgatory, which, again, think about this. Do you think that you, as you are good enough to enter into perfection, which is what heaven is, into the sight of God? No, you're a filthy, filth-covered beast. It would be like letting a rotting pig who's been covered in mud and shit run through the pristine palace of the king. You don't do that. You've got to wash that pig off at the very least. And that's painful for the pig because it's used to living in shit. So, you know, that's us. That's what purgatory is. And it's in the Bible. I mean, I don't know what Protestants read because it's literally in it. It tells you that you're going to suffer by walking through fire, you know. This is pretty clear. So why do you not think about that stuff? Of course you would have to go through a purification period. And If that purification period was pleasant, why wouldn't we be doing it now? It's not pleasant because we're corrupt, petty, selfish, luxurious, lustful little monkeys. And when we have to get clean, we don't like it. Have you ever tried to wash a cat? Same sort of thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, and that's why purgatory exists. So all these other things that, oh, well, what about the mystery or the filioque? Again, the Orthodox, the so-called Bible, it's in the Bible. It's very clear. You know, the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Son and the Father, and it's pretty much in black and white. So
that's something.
So stuff like that is like
the Trinity never really made sense to me either. You know, I stand more so with Owen on that one. It just doesn't make any sense to me logically.
Oh, what, you think it's a homosexual relationship?
No, well, he says that in a comical way. I know what he's trying to. It just doesn't make sense.
No, it's not comical. It's not comical. And I'll tell you something else. If Owen was standing in front of me, there is no fucking way on earth he would say that. None. And if I called him up on it, he would get on his knees and beg forgiveness if need be. Because as I told you, one of my heroes is Jean-Parisot Le Vallet.
What was that?
As I told you, the reason that would happen is because one of my, you know, guys that I look up to is Jean-Parisot Le Vallet. Remember what he went to jail for? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the
Owen
whole
is a blasphemous idiot.
Is the Trinity. The Trinity to me just doesn't make very much sense. That's another reason.
Well,
as I was diving into it, it was like this makes no sense.
It's in the Bible. It's very clear. These three are one. You don't have to understand it. As I said, in Catholicism, there is mysteries. And that is one of them. But there are far and few between.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm sorry, but Owen is a blasphemous idiot and a coward. And he would never say these things to my face. Not a fucking chance. And just in case he's going to get an idea that he might, he's got to be careful, because I might just get my ass on a plane to prove that out. And know me, know that that's not a joke. So, you know, he's just a blasphemous, and he lies. I'm sorry, but he just outright fucking lies about a bunch of stuff. So, no, he's no one you know, he fooled me too. I thought he was a decent guy, but I think over the time he's degraded. I don't know what's happened to him. I don't know his story, and I don't care. But he lies about a bunch of stuff, and you know, the whole flat Earth stuff, and then the Trinity blasphemy. No, he's no one worth listening to, as far as I'm concerned.
Fair enough. You are entitled to your opinions, that's for sure. So to switch it up a little bit here, so to go to the last question. The last question.
Sure.
The Orthodox and the Catholic Church, do you ever see them coming together at some point?
I kind of do, actually, which is very optimistic of me and unusual. But I know, you see, I don't think they're ever going to come together at the apex, if you like. The so-called metropolitans, you know, those guys are all politicians. They're all involved in politics, so they're dealing with worldly stuff, you know, like the fake Catholics, the metropolitans of the Russian Orthodox and whatever. They're like, those guys are involved in politics, power games, and so on. But particularly because of the actual situation of actual right now, where there isn't a valid pope, and you know, I'm sure there's a bunch of Orthodox that are like, hey, you guys don't have a pope. We kind of believe the same stuff. I don't think the filioque is, or the Trinity, or, you know, whatever aspect of it. Those are not things that the average layman is going to go to war or die on that hill, because they're making your life, whether the Holy Spirit proceeds from God alone or God and Jesus, as it says in the Bible. Are you going to go to war over that? Are you going to kill somebody over that? Are you going to die over that? I'm not, you know. And if the guys, I think that the Orthodox become stupid and illiterate if they think that it doesn't proceed from the Son as well, because again, it's in the Bible. Read the Bible. But whatever, it's not a big deal. It doesn't change your day-to-day life. You know, it's not like saying, oh, raping kids is okay. You know, it's not one of those things. like you've got in the Talmud. You can rape kids as long as they're not yet. That's fine in the Talmud. Now that religion, I'm going to have a problem with. But the Orthodox and the Catholics are essentially the same sort of thing. And I'm not talking about their priests and bishops and whatever, but because there is a valid pope at the moment, I think there is a chance for the Orthodox laymen to sort of say, guys, we believe the same stuff in essence. And, if and when there does come a pope, let's all agree on it. Because you have to understand that Orthodoxy didn't have a problem with for 1,000 years. I mean, you think there wasn't popes for the first 1,000 years, and it was all accepted by everybody that they were first among equals, and the pope always had the deciding vote on anything that wasn't decided one way or the other. And even in 1400 and something, and I think it was a Council of Florence, if I remember right, the Orthodox once again said that, we agree that the Pope has got supreme authority, but now because a couple of metropolitans didn't go there, then they said, no, we're actually go away and change our minds, which is what the Orthodox do. They basically backstab. That's what they did in 1095, and that's what they've done since. So they changed their mind. But yeah, that would be my comment on that.
Fair enough. So I guess I lied. One last question. Where can people find your work at and stay in touch with what you're doing?
Well, if you go on Amazon, if you want to read my books, just type in my name, Giuseppe Filotto, and all my books are on Amazon. If you want to look at the, find my blog is easy enough. It's gfilotto.com. Or the YouTube channel, which I haven't done any streams for a couple of weeks because just rural internet problems. That's on YouTube as well. If you go to my blog, I'm sure there's a couple of links there probably. Or if you go to the blog, you can probably find one of my. Yeah, if you go to the blog and you in the search function, there's a search me thing, and you type in there Catholic Grifters Edition, that'll bring you to a video that I did about Emma Jones, Tate Marshall, Michelle Voris, as I call them, the fake Catholics that pretend to be hardcore trad cats, but really they're grifters. And so if you go and look at that video, then from there you'll find the YouTube channel, and then there's about 240 something videos at the moment. They all have a label, so the title sort of tells you what the video is going to be about. But then, as you can see, we ramble and I go off topic now and then, but just the beast.
Right. Yeah. So I will be sure to link all your. I'll put the links in the description if I could even talk, so that way everybody can easily find your stuff. I really appreciate you coming on the show. It's been a lot of fun talking with you. No,
I really enjoyed it too, and I hope that the heathen you come to your senses soon.